All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It's so good to see you all again. Today is going to be your last Hallmark lecture of this semester. Just a couple quick reminders. One, make sure all technology is turned off and put away. I know it's really tempting to check your phone and see text messages, updates, but keep those away just for the next 50 minutes or so. Make sure that you have a good writing utensil, pen, pencil, and a good surface to write on. And I know another temptation is to kind of have some side discussions. Save all of those for your in-class discussions so you can actually get credit for those next week. So today you're going to be hearing from Abbot Placid, who is abbot of the monastery and chancellor of Belmont Abbey College, and he's going to be talking to you on the Benedictine Hallmark of Stability. So please join me in giving a nice warm welcome to Abbot Placid.
Good morning, thank you. I don't have the monks usually clap when they're going to have to listen to me, so you can bring it on. I'm glad you've been going through the hallmarks. They're not necessarily distinctive of Benedictine monastic life per se, but somehow the sort of collection of them all ought to be something that you experience in a school that's sponsored by a Benedictine community. And so we talk about stability today. You've had readings which we have allegedly done from Columbus Stewart's book on sort of a general overview of Benedictine monastic life. And you got the hallmark of stability. Why would stability be important? What did you get out of that? You've got the hallmarks posted around. I realize this is like class, avoid eye contact at all cost, unless you get called on, but what's the purpose of stability? Somebody asks you, why is stability a hallmark? What are you going to say? Oh, come on, guys, you're college students. Let's go. This is not... We just celebrated St. Simon and Jude yesterday. They got tortured to death because they said the wrong things. You guys can't even speak up. Come on, you're not going to get tortured to death any more than for 50 minutes. You won't die at the end. Or what's stability? What's the use of it? What's wrong with you guys? You're college students. Yeah, what? How does it balance life? What balance does it give you? Some comfort, yeah. What else?
Make sure you're treating everything equally.
Should you treat everything equally?
No, but like the way you should treat it.
You're treating them more in balance, maybe. Okay, yeah, that's what you were saying. Yeah. Now you have to balance you have to know what's important. You have to know what's important that gets more time and attention and what isn't, or you spend lots of time on the wrong things. What's the purpose of stability for us who live in the monastery? Why would St. Benedict prescribe? Because that's one of the things that's character. You've got a whole variety of Catholic religious orders. You got the Jesuits, you got the Dominicans, you got the Franciscans, you've got the Passionists, and then you got us. And that stability in community is characteristic of us, of monastic communities. Why did St. Benedict put that in? Why does he want us to stay with one community? What's the value in that? Why did he see a value in that? God in heavens, this is why we have a school. Yep. You're willing to stay in a place that's uncomfortable. Have any of you ever tried to manipulate your parents? I know that you don't try to that very often. You know, with everyone else's mom lets them do that. You ever use that on your parents or some variation thereof, trying to get them to let you do something that they're not going to let you do, and you know everyone else's mom doesn't let them do that, but you're going to try that anyway. Or have you ever thought, if I didn't have these brothers and sisters who get on my nerves, or these teammates who get on my nerves or whatever, that I could really excel. You ever thought about that? That it's these other people who are keeping me back? Ever come across your mind? You all think you've got the perfect family, the perfect team, the perfect classmate, and so forth? Probably not. Because there's a temptation to look towards other people or other groups and think that if, that's the perfect place and it's better there or it's easier there. And if I could only go there, I wouldn't have any problems. And one of the things that will drive the men newly come to the community nuts is when they say, well, Abbot, do something about so-and-so. He's doing this. And I'll say, why do you let it bother you? And that's what drives him up the wall. He's just being himself. Why do you let that bother you? Because we spend a lot of time wasting time on trying to change other people so that I'm more comfortable. We want them to change so that I don't have to, that I'm more comfortable. And the temptation that St. Benedict saw was that if I could just go over to that community where they have a wise and holy abbot, we're not stuck with this guy, or I can get away from brother so-and-so, I could really excel and be a spiritual master or so. So I'm going to go over there. And you find out that brother so-and-so lives there too. He just has a different name. Because, as I say, we spend so much time trying to change other people, which is almost impossible. Whereas we come to the monastery ourselves to be changed. But that's very difficult. That's very difficult. And we like to be distracted by blaming our problems on somebody else. That the seeds, however, of one's unhappiness are inside oneself. The world is as it is generally, not as it ought to be, but generally as it is. And most people are not behaving because their goal in life is to make me irritated. They're just being themselves. And if I really want to make progress, for St. Benedict's terms, in being transformed and become a holier person, being transformed to the image of Christ, then I have to work on me. And I'm the one who has to change. And that is a very difficult process. How much do you guys like to change things? How many of you know that there's something I need to improve or change in my life, but it's hard? And I really try to avoid that by every way possible. How many of you, when it was time to clean your room, take out the trash or so, could come up with 6 million excuses as to why I'll do it later, rather than just getting it over with? How many of you, when you've got a term paper, all of a sudden realize, I got to clean my room, I got to wash my clothes, I've got to do this, I got to go to the store, I got to check out Walmart, rather than sitting down, getting it done and over with? So we're good at that, right? Avoiding what we need to do. So the stability for St. Benedict was that we have to commit to seeing this good work through to the end and not run away because it's difficult. Because then we'll never change. We'll never achieve the potential that we could and would really make us happier, more successful, more peaceful people. But it's difficult. G.K. Chesterton once said that Christianity has not been tried and found wanting, it's been found difficult and not tried. Because to become a virtuous person is difficult. It takes continual effort and continual intentional choice. To become a good student takes continual effort, it takes discipline and continual choice. To become a good lacrosse player takes continual effort, discipline, and the right choices. To become a great violinist does the same thing. To become a successful accountant, the same thing. To become a good parent takes the same thing. You guys have been the best teachers your parents could ever have in obedience. Because when you were 2 months old, you ruled the schedule. Your parents, if they were going to be good parents, had to do what you needed, not what they wanted. And they did that because they had the discipline, the stability in their life and marriage to do that. So the stability as a hallmark for a Benedictine institution is to try to get our attention that the worthwhile things in life, the good things in life that we sort of know we want to achieve and that would be good for us to achieve are usually difficult. And that given the way people are, our tendency is, and we all know it, is to avoid them, avoid the difficult things and try to find the easy way out. Because we're always going for immediate gratification instead of long-term integrity. That's just the way we are as human beings. And if we want to achieve something, whether it's in academics, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in any skill we want to develop, including the skill of being a really good human being, it's something that's achieved over time and by making the same consistent choices so that we become virtuous. That is, we get those strengths to do what's going to benefit us and other people we come into contact with, and not give in to our tendency to take the easy way out, to cheat, to use somebody else's answers, because that's nice short-term gratification. But when I'm on the job and they expect me to know this that I never bothered to learn, and I'm going to get a little slip that says you're fired, it's too late. It's too late, especially if I have people dependent on my earning my salary. So the stability of, one, living with people in community, the stability of seeing something that's important through to the end and doing the things we know are necessary to get that skill, and not give in to the temptation to simply skip out on it. And that's why when one of the men newly come asked me, why don't I do something about brother so-and-so who's not doing, in their mind, what he should be doing, why do you let it bother you? Because you probably can't change his behavior. He's not disrupting anybody else. You just don't like it. So why don't you work on yourself so that you become more patient, that you become more compassionate, that you become more understanding. That's why you came to the monastery, but it's hard. Okay? Before I go on telling you everything you might not want to hear, do you have any questions from what you allegedly have read? Everything you want to know about monks but are afraid to ask. It talked about community. It talked about the abbot, the leadership. Talked about stability. Do you have anything you want to know about first? So that stability is, as I said, seeing something through. It's important in a school. It's important to learn. It's important in athletics, which is also part of your education. To see something through the way that it's supposed to be done, to learn the skills, to learn the methodology of how you do this and how it's done right. Because only if you've learned the skills as to how it's done right can you truly be creative and find better ways to do it or new ways to do it. But first of all, you have to get the basic skills. So that's the reason why that hallmark is there, to persevere in something that not only is successful in your education, it's incredibly important in forming you to be successful human beings, to see through to the end the things that are important for you, the accomplishments and the achievements you would like to see. The part I had you read talked about the Cenobitic life, the Benedictine life is. Cenobitic life simply comes from a Greek word meaning living community, so we're not hermits. There are currently 19 men in the monastic community here. And as I said, what's unique about monastic communities and that whole range of different religious communities is we actually vow stability to the community we enter. So I entered here 51 years ago this past August. And this has been my home since then. I've been away to school. I've been away for various occasions for short times. But this has been the place I'm committed to for a lifetime. That's a long time. In one place with one community. Now the community continually changes as new people come and as the senior monks get their stability in the cemetery. But that aspect of living in community and being formed by community, what we do in stability is stability and obedience. Do you remember from looking at the rule, what are the 3 vows that Benedictines make? Have you looked at that? Did anybody go over that with you? Does anybody know what the 3 vows are that religious in the Catholic Church usually make? Or the signs of consecrated life, what they are? Usually I talk about poverty, chastity, and obedience. So we, first of all, promise stability in this community. The curious Latin word, which means we're going to take on the disciplines of monastic life. That means giving up personal ownership so that we're not owned by what we own. How much time do you spend taking care of the things that you own? That we'll simplify our life, that we'll learn a discipline of prayer, that we will undertake a celibate, chaste life. And then we have our obedience. Those 3 things. Stability, pursuing the values of a monastic life, and obedience. By stability, we're saying we're agreeing to take my life, the talents that I have, and I'm going to use them for this community and what it chooses to do. That is the works it chooses to undertake. So in this case, Belmont Abbey College. That I'm going to give my views as honestly as I can in community when we discuss, as truthfully as I can, and I'm also going to listen to other people's contributions. Remember, listen is the first word of St. Benedict's rule. Listen, my son, to the precepts of the Master. Not just hear, but listen. They're a different thing. So incline the ear of your heart. Really assimilate not just what the person is saying, what do they mean? So I'm going to listen. I'm going to speak truthfully on that. And I'm going to use the talents that I have, the gifts that I have, the work that I have to support this community, even if I might not think that's perhaps the best choice or the best way to go. But if that's what the community has decided and the abbot has ratified, I'm going to give my life over to that. And I'm going to see it through to the end. The thing for monastic life to see through the end is the only criterion St. Benedict gives for determining whether you should not only enter monastic life, but why stay there, and that's truly to seek God by living, praying, and working in this community. And the stability is that if you can't love these people, these men you're living with, or in women's communities, these women you're living with, if you can't learn to love them, you're kidding yourself to think you're somehow going to be this great lover of God. So we're the ones who have to change. But that community is important. You might ask yourself, if anybody who's taken Intro to Theology, anybody right now? So few of you. Realize we insist that you take that, right? That this is something, a question educated people need to confront. Because you all have faith in something. Everybody does. The question is it can it answer the real questions that human beings have to confront or not? But one of the things that, of course, Christians believe is that what's the basic Christian view about God? If you have to describe Christianity's perception of how God has revealed himself, what is that? What is that? Why would you explain it to somebody? How does God exist in God's own self? For you Catholics here, how do you start your prayers? What do you normally do if you start to pray? Come on, just anybody. Sign of the cross. How do you do that? Name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? So we say that God is a Trinity in some mysterious way. Would it make any difference to you if we all of a sudden found out that there were 4 persons? Probably never thought of that. You might ask, where do we get this idea of 3 persons in God? First of all, that'd be something for you to think about. Why is that important? What difference does it make that God, who's the source, foundation of everything, exists as one being, but there's threeness of relationships within this one being? You ever think of that? That God somehow is a community. Exists as living. When we say God is love, it's not that God loves us, but he's living love within the reality of those aspects we call subsistent persons in the Trinity. So when you take your intro to theology, you can ask the professor, what difference does it make that God has revealed himself as a Trinity? But it means something about community. And that human beings, if the Bible teaches us, are made in the image and likeness of God. You might ask yourself what that means, but it also means that there's something about community in human life. That's why we form communities. That's why we have a college community. That's why the question is, how do you make a good community? How do we make a good community in the country we live in your neighborhood, in your family? And so that aspect of community is important for us to flourish. That's just the way we are. We look for people to relate to. Why are your friendships important to you? And why is it important to you that your friends be trustworthy, that they be loyal? It should be important to you that they be good people, because you're going to become like the people you hang out with. So why do you hang out with the people you do? Is it because they help you to be better? They make life more pleasant and easier? Or they just make life fun? So that aspect of living in community is important, and knowing what it means and what's necessary to make a good community that can be welcoming to people, that helps them actually become better people and not worse people. Like as I said, you've been the best teachers your parents have had in obedience. Because that community which is your family, your parents had to have the self-discipline and the self-sacrifice that authentic love requires in order to be your parents. And they've done that, or you wouldn't be here. They've sacrificed, and they've had the discipline to do what was needed, not necessarily which they would have preferred to do. We'll never get anywhere we want to get in life unless we develop those same things. We'll never be able truly to love someone unless we develop those same disciplines, that I'm not the center of everything. That self-discipline and self-sacrifice. And over a long term, and that's what community living does, it tests us as to whether we've developed those two skills in particular, which are necessary ultimately for long-term happiness. Talks in the materials you allegedly had to read about the abbot. The abbot is elected by the monks. We choose from ourselves who is going to exercise that service. Because the abbot's the one, and any community needs someone to sort of give direction, to make decisions. And that's why we elect an abbot, to make decisions for the community. That's why in your family, who makes the decisions for the family? Your parents. Somebody has to. It's a service, it's a necessary service, and it can be a difficult service. Who makes the decisions on your teams? Coach, captains. It's a necessary service. It's not necessarily pleasant for the coach or the parents or the captains, but it's necessary. So the abbot has to have a vision of what St. Benedict was trying to set up in the 6th century and how we live that authentically in the 21st century in circumstances quite different from southern Italy in the year 540. And if you look at what you take for granted about life, about the world, about the universe, it's quite different than someone living in the 6th century would have thought about. You people take it for granted that human beings have actually walked on the moon. Some of us saw that happen for the first time. Up till that time, it was just sort of science fiction. It wasn't real. It was just imaginary. But y'all take that for granted. You take cell phones for granted. You can just contact anybody pretty much on the face of the globe. People in St. Benedict's time probably traveled no more than about a radius of 30 miles of where they were born. So it's a whole different world. What was he trying to create? He's trying to create, it seems, a supportive community, an enclosed group where everything supported the main purpose. And that main purpose was, does the man truly seek God? And everything that he sets up for living together is focused on that purpose. So if you're coming into a college community in Stability, everything here is generally focused in a community to support what you come for. That is to learn. So you have obviously prescribed curriculum. You can't just come in and say, I'm going to take 120 hours of whatever I want. But it's prescribed for you. If you want to be a good doctor, this is what you need to know. If you're going to be a good accountant, this is what you need to know. If you're going to be an expert in literature, this is what you need to know. It's not your choice. The athletic program is part of the education. How do you work together as a team? How do you cooperate with people you might not get along with all that well to achieve the mission? How do you accept it when you've done your very best, you've prepared yourself well, you've worked hard, and the other team wins? Is that a disappointment? In some sense it will be. Or can you think that was really a privilege to play somebody that good? It really tested us. We did the best we could, and we did well. But sometimes we're not going to be the number one. Can you live with that? That we're not necessarily the best person on the face of the earth. The residence halls, there are rules for that you won't find at other places. Why? Because there's a vision of what's good for human life. It's not just left up to the individual. So all those things of having a vision about what makes life good, that is in the long run. If you want an interesting experience when you're a teacher here, which I had when I'd go in, I teach the intro to theology, 8 o'clock, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can imagine how people were thrilled to be an intro to theology at 8 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so you would get this is not my major, why do I have to take this? And you're looking out, students at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, and you're thinking, these are the future parents of America. How encouraging do you think that might be to look out at a class of college students at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, probably in a class they think they're not interested in, and this is the future of our country. Can be a little off-putting until you meet the alumni who've been through this, have been formed by it, very successful in their careers, very successful as parents, because they've been changed, they've been formed. And that's what you've come here for. That goes back to the stability. If you're going to make the changes that you need to do to be successful in the career you're dreaming about, this is what I would like to do. If you're going to be successful, and I assume most of you are looking for, imagine that 10 years from now you'll be married, have a family. If you're going to be successful at that, you've got to change. You're going to have to change. That's the purpose of it. Somebody has to have a vision of what it means to lead a good human life. And it's not that we just sort of fall into it, but we have to work at it. And that's what the abbot does, makes decisions on things so that we can live as authentically as possible our monastic life. There's a rule to it, same as you have rules, whether it's on your team, whether it's in the class, whether it's in the residence halls, whether it's at home, to give us some structure and direction so we know what's expected. If your professor just came in and said, okay, you have a 25-page paper due next Monday, make sure it's in on time, you'll be lost. What am I supposed to write about? I don't know. Any other instructions on that? We need instructions to sort of give us an idea of what's the goal. What am I supposed to do? What's the expectation? And that's what rules do, one kind or another. They give us the guidelines. They give us the instruction. They give us the direction that we're supposed to go so that we have some idea about what I'm supposed to do so that I can do it as best I can, or at least have an opportunity to do that. And so there's rules and structure in the monastery as well. So you've got a life in community for a lifetime, in one place, in a structured life, under the direction of an abbot to whom you've promised obedience. And you've promised to stay with these people and learn to live with them and actually to love them for a lifetime. The rule has lasted almost 1,500 years. There hasn't been a day since St. Benedict finished his rule. Let's say he died somewhere around 547, so let's say he finished it in 540, that there haven't been communities of Benedictine men and women with that rule as our basic daily constitution. That forms the structure of the life in which we live. So there must be something valuable in that. That's a long time. It's the longest experiment in community living in Western culture. So you need to think in your own lives as it applies differently from our life, because our life's different from yours. What is that value of stability? What is the value of community? What is the value of rules? What is the value of discipline? What is the value of sacrifice? Are the things that are worth sacrificing for? What's going to take for you to be those future parents of America? What are you going to have to learn about yourselves and your behavior that's going to make you someone able to raise your child? Because that will be the most important thing for you in your life. It's the only thing you're going to do that will last forever. And you would die for this child. There will be such an impact of unconditional love. Have you got the virtue, the strength, and the knowledge of life to do that well? Probably not at this point. But you're here so that you can attain that by seeing it through in this community or any educational community. You've got to see it through. You've got to develop that stamina, that commitment that it takes to see something through and not be put off track by seeking an easier or simple way out or just doing my own thing or avoiding the hard things that I know I need to do. Somebody needs to have a vision. You're going to have a vision for your own life. Who you want to be. Who's the woman, who's the man you want to be, that you ought to be. And what's that going to require? To some extent, you have to be your own abbot. And you have to stick to that. You also have to, as you learn more and have more life experience, know what needs to be changed. So we don't live St. Benedict's rule in its literal exactness. That was fine in the 6th century in Italy. It wouldn't work now. So how do you incorporate the same values under changing circumstances so that the value achieves what it ought to achieve? How are you going to do that in your life? And how are you going to share that with others so that when you go out, are in charge of your families, that you're living in a neighborhood, that you're working in whatever profession you do, that you're going to help create an environment that optimizes what your mission is, what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do, and make the place where you live a better place than when you came. So that's what you've run into by coming to a Benedictine school. That is the hallmark of stability, the hallmark of obedience, one of conversatio, that is, what kind of lifestyle do you want to live? What kind of lifestyle ought you live? Of hospitality. How do you welcome and benefit from different people different from yourself? What do you learn about them? What do you learn from them? It's a unique environment, but community is important. I know are you forming good community right now? How about in your suite? Team? Classroom? Are you contributing to a good community? Or are you sort of tearing it down because you're more concerned about what you want than what's good? You'll benefit from the amount of effort you give for that. This aspect of stability is countercultural today. Most people change jobs several times. Most people move around several times. That's neither bad nor good in one sense, it's just different. But the monastic life simply stands. The monastic life evangelizes in the first place just by existing. Because to some extent you have to ask yourself, since you've come to Belmont Abbey College, why the monks are here. It's difficult probably for students to believe that we were once college students, sitting in the same place you are. And it's like mom and dad. Mom and dad have always been mom and dad. They were born mom and dad. You don't know mom and dad except mom and dad. So why did I and my confreres do this? Is this something people ought to do? Is it a good thing for some people to do? If so, what makes it good? Are we either on to something that's important and thus remind people of what's ultimately important in life, or is it simply something quaint and it gives you a sort of panache at your college that you won't find at UNCC? You don't know people running around in 9th century dress and so forth. But why did we join the monastery? Is that a waste of our life? Is it a mistake? Is it quaint but useless? Or are we perhaps onto something? Is it worth the discipline that it takes to live this life with integrity? It's because of that, living this life with integrity, that ultimately provided your college. And we did that not as a sort of humanitarian outreach, because it's good for you to have school to go to any school you want, but because the purpose of the education is not just to get your facts and what you learn about your discipline that you're studying or your major you want to take, but the more important one is that you learn to have a successful human life, that you have a good life, and you know what that means, and you're committed to it. Ultimately, the reason for our founding the college is to get you guys to heaven, believe it or not. And the way you do that is by using the talents you've been given. And every person in this room has a unique set of talents and is a human being, in our view, endowed with inestimable dignity, created in the divine image and likeness, a center of consciousness and of choice, and is worthy of respect and has an inherent dignity that nobody can take away. Your goal is to lead such a good life by using the talents you've been given and by finding out what's truly the good and being committed to that and having the discipline to live it, so that ultimately you've created a human life so good that it's worthy of eternal life. Because that's why we create things like literature, art, music. There's something that leads us beyond the immediate present and the immediate material. That's why we're worried about, is this good or bad? We may disagree on what's good and bad, but we have some concept that there's some things good people ought to do, and they ought to do them always, and there's some things good people ought never to do under any circumstances. Where does that come from? Where do we get that idea? There's a certain element in human life that goes beyond the merely temporal and the present. St. Augustine talked about it in terms, God, you've created us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. That's why we look for goodness beyond ourselves. That's why we sacrifice for people. That's why your parents sacrifice for you. That it's worth it. That love is worth it. That what they've had to sacrifice for their child is worth infinitely more than they could have otherwise had. Is that true? If that is true, then there's something beyond the mere here and now that we need to pay attention to, of what's the truly good that will give me ultimate peace and life and let me know I've lived a good human life. I hope your time at Belmont Abbey College will give you some insight into that, so that you, the future parents of America, will indeed be the best. And for those children who will be the most precious thing in your life, that you will indeed provide them with what they need for the best life possible. And I hope somehow interacting with us, the monks, will help you on that path. That we have something that might be valuable for you to investigate. Why did we do this? Not that everybody's supposed to do this. Why did we do this? Why do we choose this as what we're going to do with our lives? What's the value behind that? Okay? Thank you for your patience. You can take one day off of Lent for having suffered through this today.